G'day and welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life, and today we're going to be comparing my 2006 Honda Accord with this immaculate 1997 Honda Prelude VTi-R 5-speed manual. In terms of exterior styling, I've long maintained that the 5th gen Prelude was when Honda finally got it right. You have lots of cool features like a sunroof and like the little body kit that goes all around the outside and the typical fat 5-spoke wheels and the little spoiler on the back and everything. My Accord, on the other hand, is also a very timeless and very good looking car, but obviously with it being a family sedan, it doesn't quite have that same wedge-like proportion of the Prelude, but overall I still think it is a very lovely looking vehicle. The engine fitted to the Prelude VTi-R is the blacktop H22. It makes about 147 kilowatt and about 215 newton meters of torque, and it's paired up with a 5-speed manual transmission. The Accord, on the other hand, has a K24 A3, which in many ways is kind of the newer version of the H22. And in the case of mine, from factory, it made 140 kilowatts, so a little bit less than this, and 223 newton meters, so a little bit more than this. And it's paired up with a delightful 6-speed manual transmission. What I love about the Prelude's interior is that it doesn't feel old. The steering wheel looks remarkably similar to the one that you find in the NSX and is made of a very nice high quality leather, and the rest of the interior is amazingly well put together for a car that is 25 years old. It's well equipped too. It's got stuff like cruise control, it has a fully automatic climate control cluster down here with an LCD screen to show the current temperature and the fan speed, and it still has the original Alpine stereo, which doesn't work. Other parts of this interior that are glorious is the transmission feel. The clutch, brake and throttle are all placed perfectly. Really the only downside to the interior is that the headroom is less than ideal. The back seats are pretty much completely useless and the boot is only big enough for a couple of bags. The advantage the Accord has on the interior front is that it's just straight up newer. The material choice in here is just that little bit nicer. The steering wheel, while it is a little bit bigger than the one in the Prelude, it just has an even nicer quality leather. All the buttons feel a lot better put together, and you have a lot more features in here. You have dual zone climate rather than single zone. You have a much better stereo that does work. You have cruise control that's a bit less ancient, and it has other stuff like traction control and a fairly comprehensive trip computer, along with other features on some of the upper spec models as well. The other nice thing about it is that the transmission feels glorious. I personally actually think the pedal box feels better in the Prelude. I don't know why. The clutch on this kind of goes light, heavy, whereas the Prelude's clutch is just very smooth and very linear all the way through, but everything else about the Accord's interior is better, and it's a lot more practical. Okay, we're going to do a rolling race, but I'm going to be in 4th and he's going to be in 3rd to try even it up a bit. Alrighty, and 3, 2, 1, go. Three, 2, 1, go. Yeah. There we go. So if the K24 can get into VTEC initially, then the answer is quite obvious. Driving the 1997 Honda Prelude, this is one of the nicest cars I've ever driven. Just listen to this. Just perfection. A lot of you guys will know I'm not the biggest fan of 90s Hondas. To me, they are just too old, too cheap inside, too rattly, too uncomfortable. But this is a bit of me, man. VTEC. Oh, there it is. You hear it, you feel it. Oh, yes! Oh, I love this! This is just where this car belongs. In my life, I've owned nothing but Accords and Integras, and what I wanted above all else is a combination of the two. The Integras are too raw for me, too uncomfortable, and the Accord is good, but it's a big car, it's a big heavy car. and it's great fun to drive, and now that I've done all the modifications to it, it's much faster than this. But what I've longed for is something that's kind of a combination of the two, and this is exactly that. Perfect amount of power, great soundtrack, great steering feel, immediate throttle response, an incredible feeling transmission, and yet it's quiet, it rides well, it's comfortable, these seats are fantastic, they hold you in really nicely, they're not too aggressively bolstered. Oh gee, it nearly goes all the way to 8,000, it goes like right into the red line. Oh, I have not stopped smiling since I got behind the wheel of this car, it is that good. Oh, how good is this car, man? It is simply fantastic to drive. I absolutely love it. The Accord. It feels big, it feels solid, and from stock the H22 is definitely more interesting than the K24, but now that mine is modified, it is impossible to ignore the brilliance of the K24. And that really is why you buy a Honda, right? You buy it because it's got a great chassis, all the inputs are fantastic, and because it has VTEC. I mean, why wouldn't you want this? Oh yes. In terms of how these cars drive, it's interesting, eh? That sort of lift-off oversteer characteristic doesn't seem to have carried on to Honda's newer cars, because I've heard that the DC2 and the EK9 are like that, where you kind of lift off through corners and the back end wants to waggle around a bit, which is why people love those older Hondas so much. The Accord is not like that at all. This car has way more front end traction, which means that when you really start to push it through these corners, it just hangs on so much better. The Prelude, if I'm honest, ran out of traction way quicker than I expected. It wasn't exactly a handling beast. Now it was fun because it moved around and so on, but this car, especially now that I've modified it, is just a much more competent car. The engine makes way more power, way more torque. Even out of VTEC, it still goes really well. The Prelude is special in its own right and has its own unique way that it drives. And then when Honda brought their cars into the 21st century, they sort of brought with it the modern car performance, but with the old car driving dynamics. But either way, both of these cars are simply fantastic, and if you can find yourself a nice 5th gen Prelude like that, you will not be disappointed. I would absolutely recommend it. So there we go. Thanks very much for watching this episode of Kiwi Car Life, and if you want to see me comparing my Accord with a CL1 UOR, then click over here, and if you want to see me comparing it with a 94 Accord EXIS, then click over here, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you again next time.